Name is Nils Mockler, 563708, PFC, Permanent Freaking Civilian. We were citizen soldiers. We did the best goddamn job you ever saw. Saved the world. I had that much part of it, and I'm very proud.
Very nice.
They gave a war and everybody came. I was 17. I was a big 120 pounds. Joined the Marine Corps. They looked at me. You'll wait. So that was 43. Finally in 44 I bulked up to about 125 and they took me. And I liked boot camp. There'd been depression, and my father had the bad sense to be a war hero and was gassed. He died in his very early 30s. He died in 1929. And we didn't have food. Boot camp had food. Lots of good food. I liked it. I was a runner and I liked beating everybody else. I still would if I could. And then they had a chance for something that made boot camp look like a bunch of brownies running around in the woods. Combat intelligence, explosives, rubber boat landing, night marches in the swamp. Hey, they didn't have SEALs back then, but that's as close as we could come. And so naturally, I mean, what else are you going to do? You go for it. So combat intelligence. So wind up with that, then I get a secondary spec as so I wind up with an intelligence spec number that gets to be important. And I picked up a secondary spec as BAR, Browning Automatic Rifle, which two great specialties if you want to be killed. But we did the best we could. Everybody was doing it, and there didn't seem to be anything very special about it. Get shipped out finally to San Diego, spend a whole night there, and wind up in Hawaii. And first of all on Oahu, standing on the beach like, what are we doing here? And then they shipped a couple of us over to Maui, and you're in the 4th Division. So I'm a scout, one of the guys, the other 2 scouts, and it's towards the end of 1944. And we're just getting hooked up into the division, and okay, we're going on this secret mission. Big secret. The newspaper in Honolulu had a headline, Marines headed for Iwo Jima. It was a very secret mission. So we were on board ship for about a month altogether, moving back and forth and going on liberty in Honolulu by going down a greasy cargo net and trying to keep perfectly clean in the only uniform we had that was just out for shore leave. So then we hit Iwo Jima, and because again I had the intelligence spec number, you're going to the intelligence briefing. Well, we didn't have the insignia on our sleeves, and the officers didn't have the insignia on their collars. The insignia was on the inside, so all you could see was safety pin saying I'm an officer. And my rank was private, tank battalion, and what was stenciled on my back was 9/11 with a 1 above it. 1 means you don't have any rank at all. But once you sit down, nobody can see that because the back of the chair covers it. So they must have figured that I was some kind of, I looked all of 16. All right, I was shaving when I had to, and they made me. The 2 easiest days in Marine Corps history. They break out the map. First day we take the airport, clear around, okay, this island has been hit with everything we have, we're going to walk onto it. Second day we take the rest of the island, it's all been blasted, and then the third day we clean up and then we get ready to go for a real operation. Guys take off. We're still on the boat. Tank battalion. We only had a couple of tanks on our ship. Everything went beautifully. Everything was going like $1 million. Everybody went in. Seabees were landing along with us for the first and only time that I know of. And we piled ammunition, gasoline, everything, explosives on the beach. Everything was. And then they hit us with everything in the world because they had been in what we considered to be little tunnels, little caves, were actually a network of what we found out much later on, 22 miles worth of tunnels, which had been shaken up a little bit by the bombardment, but not much more. So the afternoon of D-Day, things got kind of hairy. And we started hearing back on the ship that, gee, things aren't going all that well. And then things are going very badly, but again, we had very little communication. So you get scuttlebutt, this is what's going on. So I had a nice little notebook, I'm writing down all this, you know, it doesn't sound too great, but what the hell. And then all of a sudden, about 10 o'clock, this is the next morning, D+1, you go in, and you really can't describe it. It was just everything was scrambled. It was just black sand, or what passes for sand, and equipment and torn to shreds, and constant bombardment, just noise. So we found the headquarters company, because that's what I was assigned to, of course, and they had a hole not even as big as the bar, and that's where people were clustered, and say, okay, for the night you'll be here. So the idea of night, we didn't really have night on Iwo Jima, because somebody must have had all the parachute flares in the entire world, and they would be up constantly. You'd hear them flutter up and puff, and then the flare would come down slowly. After a while, we all got very jumpy about that sound. So here we are being shot at, we're in the hole, we don't know what's going on. Well, that went on for the next month, being in the hole, being shot at, not knowing what's going on. So the two scouts, the one guy stayed on the onboard ship, and they didn't know what to do with me, because I was supposed to be showing the tanks where to go, and our tanks were stuck and running into mines, and so they had people who were much more qualified, and there was no real scouting to do, because what you would do would be to try to hide behind a tank. So I wound up at the airport on pretty much permanent, 24-hour guard duty, and I'd come back down to find out what the hell was going on once in a while, and it would say, okay, hey, Mockler, go and find the freaking tanks. Find out what they need, because the radios were out after about the second day, maybe the third day. Batteries were shot, the tanks most of them were revetted. They'd lost the treader, they had no place they could be. The Japanese knew exactly where the tanks could go, and they had mines. They had mines that would go after one time, some that would take 5 or 6 times, some that would take forever, and then some that would just go off when they felt like it. So, and when our Sherman tanks lost a tread, they were stuck. They could not move. So, go and find the freaking tanks. Well, you had 3 different divisions, and which tank is which? The only thing we could do is our tanks had wooden sponsons on them because they had been on Saipan and Tinian, where the Japanese would come up with magnetic mines and slap them on the tank and blow the tank. So they had the wooden sponsons. And so I'd try to find them, and I'd go up and get around behind the tank. And I was about as welcome as ants at a picnic, because you don't want to walk up, because they were watching from like right over there. And if you look important, or if you have something going on, so I'd walk up and try to look like some dumb yokel wandering around and get around and say, what do you need? Everything. Okay, all right. Can we write something down? And you scroll it down, and I get back. I have no idea if they really could get the stuff they needed. But just nobody knew what was going on. As far as I could tell, we all thought it was just the one spot we were at that was getting slammed like that, except that we could see, once I got up on the second or third level, I got up to where the airfield was, the small one. You could look and see that stuff was coming down all over the place. And then they blew our munition dump at least once, which caved in all of our nice little, they wouldn't be foxholes, it would be about this size for a rat, because they keep caving in. And then we looked up and the flag was there. It's the point where I choke up, because we were losing. We had far more casualties than the Japanese, and they were beating the hell out of us. And then we looked up in the flag, you could see the flag. And I got in trouble talking to a high school group by saying that was the biggest thrill I'd had in my life, right up until I got back to the States and got old enough to have sex. But it's, whoever had the idea of getting that big flag and getting it up there where you could see it, and it was pretty damn good. Okay. Once you get up there, you realize that you're looking right down on the invasion beach. Now that's for the first at least 3 or 4 days, that was just plain hell. That was the whole part of the island we had. And then as the guys finally got a little farther down, and the tanks got progressively less mobile, and well, by the time we finished, they also sprayed the island. They had a tremendous supply, apparently, of DDT in what looked like a combination of drain oil and kerosene, because everything we had, our shelter halves, our clothes, everything was black dotted with this stink of diesel fuel. So life was. And of course, we went in with one canteen of water. The guys in the rifle company generally went in with a couple of clips and a bandolier. Again, one canteen of water, one blanket, one spare pair of socks, one pair of skivvy shorts, a shirt. I was lucky I had a beat up old sweatshirt, because it got plenty cold. You're pretty far north, and this is February. One thin blanket, and your shelter half, and a poncho. That's it. Well, after about maybe 2 or 3 weeks, you stink. You can't wash. We had maybe enough water to drink, but it came out of the Lister bags, which produce something that you can drink, but you wouldn't want to ever again in your life. It just stinks. And it was lukewarm, but you could drink it. So we stunk. And you probably heard the story because it's true. And one guy who was so rotten that he found they were sending in replacements, kids right fresh out of boot camp, and there was no organization for them to come into because the officers were killed or badly wounded. The non-commissioned officers were killed or badly wounded. So we had corporals running a platoon, and damn kids kept on going. they ran out of people to tell them what to do, so they did it on their own, and they simply kept on going. Now you're talking about high school kids, maybe college freshman age, and everybody did. Okay, now, and as when I talk about it, it's just like, you know, you think you're some kind of a hero. Hell no. I said, I was there because I volunteered, and I am very happy I did. Not just proud, I'm happy. It was the best thing I ever did. And I came out with nothing more than ringworm. So I had a scar for a long time I couldn't show people. So, because it was right in the crotch, and not too romantic either, let me tell you. But the one guy, when we went back for the reunion, he swore that he's talking to us, he's not talking to the press. And he said that he found a replacement who'd come in and been killed, and he had clean clothes. And he said he stripped the guy and put his clean clothes on, and then took his stinking uniform and put it on the corpse. And that's been with him ever since, that he was reduced to that. So I was there. I did every damn thing I could, and it was nothing remarkable. It was what they say. I didn't know enough to be afraid, I guess, too young and with no sleep. I know the first 3 days I didn't sleep at all, and after that very little. So you're stumbling around trying to figure what the hell is going on. And then walking up by the cemetery, and there's this guy standing there in civilian clothes handing out toothbrushes and stuff for the Salvation Army. So the toothbrush and whatever I got has cost me many $100s over the year, because every time anybody come in here, put $1 on the drum to save another drunken bum. And then all of a sudden, when we went in, the horizon was quite literally ringed with ships, and not just on the outlet, just the whole ocean was filled with ships. When it was time for the division to leave, we got onto 3 small troop ships and waited for the rest of the group. And then we sailed off, because that's all the group there was, 3 ships. Tank Battalion, we came back with 1 functioning tank. When we came back, company streets, the tents go all the way down the street, like from here to Main Street. And they put the guys who had come back in the rifle company, they put them in the tents together. There would be lights on the first, maybe 3 tents on each side of the street, and they're dark from there on. So I was there. The guys in the rifle companies had it much worse, and if I had been integrated into the division and the battalion sooner, I might have gotten more to do, but I did every damn thing I could, and I still feel that it was the best thing I ever did. And as I said, it saved my life, because I got angry enough to quit smoking, and that's the last cigarette I had was on Iwo, and cigarettes killed the rest of my family. So thank you, Iwo Jima. And then my next door neighbor now was 3 years old in Tokyo, and everything we were doing to get the island of Iwo Jima was to allow for our bombers to carry more fire bombs to bomb Tokyo, and to kill Ken Kondo, my neighbor. And I'm very glad we didn't kill Ken Kondo. And we gave the island back. And the Japanese who were stationed there should really get extra pay, because it is one miserable piece of real estate. And the one was 7.7 millimeter, and that had enough juice to stop you. It wasn't quite as hot as ours. They're lower muzzle velocity, but it was big enough to have some shock power. A lot of them were still carrying the 6.5 millimeter, which is not much bigger than a 22, and also fairly low. So it would penetrate and wound, but it wouldn't shock too much. But again, you're shooting at close range. They were killing people with their older rifles too. And but so they said, well, we had the better rifle, but it doesn't do you any good when the guy's in a rock, and you can't see in the hill that there's anybody in there, because all you got to be is back a couple of feet. And so they're watching the whole time, and guys deciding, when is it worth giving up my life to fire? Because as soon as somebody would fire, they'd go after them with, if we still had enough, if we had a tank close enough, we'd fire with the 75 millimeter. And everybody would fire at the hole, and then they'd send somebody up with a flamethrower. And then they'd try to get we had 16, I'm pretty sure, pound packs of plastic adhesive, explosives, C2. And sticks it, you would screw it in, and push them in as far as possible and blow. For a long time, figuring these were just caves. We took a while to realize that they were all connected. So, and they finally took and pumped smoke into them as we were leaving, and you could see it pouring out of the openings. So then you could tell they were all connected. Tunnels, yeah. We went back for the 50th reunion, and the main entrance was about like this, about yay high, and on the side away from where almost all the action took place, and the tunnels were, the rock was very easy to carve. And then when the air hit it, it hardened. So they had slave labor there for years. And Iwo Jima is actually part of Tokyo. I don't know if there's any other part of Japan that we ever took during the war. Sovereign Japan. So, but they had, I guess somebody counted up to 22 miles. And they had at least one room big enough for 500 men at a time. They also had a hospital. They had lights strung through the tunnels. They weren't great, but you could see. And the tunnels were wide enough so that people could pass in, going in either direction. And we could get through them. And you see, well, the Japanese are small. Not all the Japanese who were on the island were small. Some of them were very large indeed. They were from the Northern Islands. They were the cream of the crop. So one of our guys was very heavy, fat, and husky, and he needed a new belt, and he found one on a Japanese corpse that was too long for him. The guy was about 6'4" and big, so they weren't all that small, but the tunnels accommodated us, and obviously they got through them as well. But they were very, very good, very tough, and since again I had the intelligence spec and I could wander wherever I wanted, when they would bring the prisoners, and there were very few prisoners, they'd bring them, the guys were completely dazed, and we thought that they had clothed themselves with a bed sheet or something like that to wrap, and then I found out later on that that's the Japanese men's style of underwear. They use a sash that's wrapped in a very, very just like the Marines would be very happy with it, doing it exactly this way. You must do it in this kind of fold. So, but they'd come in, and they had one American Nisi, first generation Japanese, and always with an extremely tall, blonde, very obviously Caucasian, and they were Army, so naturally they were the enemy, and they would come in off the ship to do this, so they would be clean, and they would have clean uniforms, so naturally everybody resented the hell out of them. But I could be there for the questioning, because I just walk up, because there's nobody to say no. And the American DC would yell at the guy, and I never saw him slap one, but then the Caucasian guy would come in and have a cigarette and whatever, and the Japanese would tell everything, because they had never been told they could be captured, they would be killed. That's it. And they'd give them the map, and they'd say, okay, yes, here's where we are, here's our field of fire, here's our guns. And I learned just enough Japanese numbers and whatever to be able to read the date on a map to see if the map was valuable, because the date, all I had to remember was that the date started the year I was born. The Emperor Hirohito was the last in the line. So if you had one that was like 16, 17, 18, or 15, 16, 17, it had been done within the last 3 or 4 years, and it was valuable. If it was numbered like 2 or 3, it was from way back before there was any thought of a war. So that much I could read. And it would take me a little bit to get back to be able to do that. But your dynasty, it'd be convenient to start in 1926, was easy for me to remember. So, but, and for all well, everybody says there's no such thing as an ex-Marine. I'm an ex-Marine. I do not dwell on it. This is the first time I spoke to the one high school group in Georgia, and that was a little strange, because I'm good at talking to high school groups, and but the Marines are a strange crew. Of course. And then after a while you say, wait a minute, there should be a little limit on following orders. No, you shouldn't really shoot the captain of the boxer just because he's walking into the nurse's quarters. And when I took the safety off the rifle, that's when he stopped right in the middle of the step and turned around. I had no idea, and I saw all of the confetti up here, and he walked back to his Jeep, and I looked him up. He lived a nice, long, comfortable life. But when I said halt, he didn't halt. When I took the safety off, the click, in a very quiet, and I don't think he finished his step. Just turned, and I looked. I believe the expression is holy shit. Like, So you say, okay, there should be a limitation. It's not sand, it's the damnedest stuff. You wade through it. It's not really all that heavy. I mean, and this, as I said, from the 50th anniversary, this is from Blue Beach 1. Blue Beach 1 is where the 4th Division went in. It's where there was a lot of people killed. And at the top of the grade was the cemetery. we hadn't planned on a cemetery. We hadn't planned on casualties. We had 2 hospital ships that were sitting offshore. They would have been filled in the first day if they could have gotten the wounded out to them. And the cemetery was shelled on a regular basis. And graves registration. Some of the bodies that came in after a week or 2 had been in the sun for a while. And some of our own guys had been burned with flamethrowers. Probably the guys who'd been using the flamethrowers. And they'd put them in the ground, and then they would be shelled. And then they'd go back and they'd pick up the pieces as well as they could, and they'd put them with the dog tags, and then they'd be shelled again. So they would put the best they could possibly do to put whole bodies back, the ship back to the States. And I know damn well they couldn't get them all. Also, there were enough pieces torn around that they couldn't pick up all the fragments. My personal feeling that some of that stuff migrated down to the beach, and I did what everybody else did. We took the barf bags from the plane and filled them up, and then don't play with it. We climbed back up because they're terraces, and now there's vegetation, so there's a little more purchase, but at the same time it was still a very difficult climb. And one of the guys walking with 2 of the special canes, like heavy duty canes, with the wrist grips, had a pack, and he put something like 30 pounds of that sand in the pack. Now, the reason that I can tell you it was like 30 pounds is that when we got on the plane, I put it up in the rack for him, and he carried that around all day long. That was the first thing we all did after the speeches and after the crap. We all went down to the beach and got sand, and he came back up on his own. Nobody helped him. Nobody would dare, any more than anybody would let the young Marines there help us up onto the trucks to move around. You know, you got to be. There must have been a couple of people who did finally, but after a while they would just stand there trembling. You know, please don't die on my watch. So, but this is it. It's you wade through it, and then on different parts of the island, up near Suribachi, and then farther out. It was so hot. The ground was so hot that you couldn't stay in a hole. You would cook. And we took the cardboard tubes at the artillery ammunition, and they were all over the place. You'd grab them and push them down into your hole and try to keep it from caving in on you. And also to keep you cool enough so that you could live. And then what everybody found out very quickly is that when you're in a hole at night and the ground is hot, and when the sun first comes up, that your hole is steaming like this, and that anybody who's over there knows exactly what's in the hole. And if anybody was stupid enough to stick a head out, a lot of people got it right in the forehead. And back at the reunion, one guy brought his helmet, and his helmet had a crease, the metal helmet. It went between the plastic liner and creased it all the way around. And he said that after the first day or 2, you learned that if you had the crap, you would take and scoop some sand up in the helmet. Remember, the metal part of the helmet goes over the plastic, so you have a little feeling if you're not crapping in your own hat. And you would defecate, and then you would take the helmet and you would throw it out like that with the sand. And before you got out of the hole, the guys would pretty much the same thing. The way they would get out of the hole, it would be like the teams coming into the stadium, bursting through the paper. He would come out of the hole on a dead run because you did not want to have time for somebody to pick you out. You would be out and you would try to get wherever it was you wanted to get to. and a lot of them would get behind a tank, and then there would be mortars fired behind the tank. So it was we were really getting whipped. And then we finally wore them down, partly because they ran out of food, they ran out of water, and you can live in a hole just so long, I guess. And so this was the close to what they call a beach, okay? And it would come in almost dead level, and then there'd be a bank, and you'd crawl your way up that. And I would go back and forth. I was up at the airport, and after, I guess, a couple of weeks, the Army took over, and they decided they didn't need to have guard duty because the island was almost secure. So they sent up tents, and the guys got into tents to sleep, and then the Japanese came through with knives and cut into the tents and killed them, and walked down the runway where especially the artillery spotter planes, with grenades, and blew a bunch of them up. And then they decided it was time to have guards. So that was after we had left. And again, I know what I did, but again, I was so sleepy, and it was just all over, that I have spotty memories of what the hell's going on here and whatever, and watching heavy machine gun plunging fire come towards me and saying, oh, and then it stopped, and I said, And the one other sharp memory is, say, well, what do you remember? Taking cover when you're being fired upon. Well, cover means you have something that will stop a bullet. That was pretty good, except that I was trying to hide behind a piece of combat wire, which is about that thick, and I realized that's what I'm trying to hide behind. That I thought it was pretty funny. After you are doing what? So, like the Malden cartoon, the guy trying to climb inside his helmet. And then we got back to Maui, and we were getting ready, and sort of they were doing ceremonies, and some of the wounded started filtering back, a few, and then all of a sudden they dropped the bomb and it was over. And judging from the way they had fought, if we had had to go in and invade Japan, we would have had a very long, bloody battle. So people say, well, we killed all those people, we did whatever, and my feeling is it's like a woman having a radical mastectomy. My God, that's terrible. In the meantime, it's what saved your life. So yes, you were carved up. Yes, you're going to live with it the rest of your life. Yes, you're going to have these problems. In the meantime, it's what saved your life. So so that's what I did on my summer vacation. I was 18. One of the guys who got Medal of Honor was still 17 years old when he got the medal. Or posthumously, of course. But I had my 19th birthday on the ship going back to Maui. We had pulled out of our camp in Hawaii completely with the idea we were going to be moving on for some real combat. So I guarded Japanese prisoners, and we treated them decently. They worked hard, unloading beer. Lots and lots of beer that wasn't going to be shipped back to the States. Unimaginable amounts of beer that they would take and spread out in cases and then run bulldozers up and down on top of them and then pile coral on top of that. It smelled like a saloon on Monday morning. Their foreman would yell at them and threaten them, and we'd stop them, and they'd look like, "You're not allowing our superior to hit us? Like, what the hell kind of thing is this?" And they managed to keep themselves. I don't know how they were managed to keep they had their own military uniforms, and they managed to have them clean all the time. I have no idea how they managed to do it, but they did. So, and all I ever learned to say was, "Stop, put up your hands, and take off your clothes," and a couple of filthy insults. So, and my pronunciation was bad, but it worked. So, it's 70 years ago. They have no idea what being a hero means. And I don't know if anybody really planned to be a hero, except maybe John Basiloni, who should have gotten a second Medal of Honor. He pushed his way back in as a machine gunner. He said, "I'm a machine gunner. I am going to take over." And he was killed up by the airport on either the first, I think the second day, maybe the first day. And, but most of the guys didn't have a choice. They just all of a sudden you say, "What are you going to do next?" And you say, "Gee, I don't know." And then you say, "Well, this fits the definition of that's what I would do." And I don't know. I don't know whether. All right, I took a little time to write it out. I'm not willing to open myself to the charge that I am positing myself as some kind of a hero. Most of the heroes are dead, and the others generally say that they didn't plan it that way. It was just a choice given to them, and they found it in themselves. Did I face death? Hell yes. Was I afraid? Not usually. I was too young, too sleep deprived, and the threat was all around but unseen until it happened. I'll quote myself. And I've had too much time to think about it, and I've been thinking about this for a while, and to get a DVD in a form short enough to say, "Hey, here's what a bunch of very young, dedicated people did, and I don't know how many of them thought they would be able to do it." You know, is it there when you reach for it? And it was. And a couple of guys said, "Yes, I was so afraid that I would, if I could have deserted, I would have." And they said, "But we couldn't." And that after too much, some guys would just hit the wall, and they'd take and lead them away. And I didn't hear anybody say anything about cowardice or anything else. There's just so much you can take, and the guys could take just so much.
Oh, I don't know. I played yesterday.
It was the most intense thing in my life, and to go back and look at it and say, was it really like that? And to go back and look and to say, yeah, it sure was. Okay. And my redneck roommate phrased it, we put a lot of ghosts to sleep. You look around and you say, okay, I was here because I volunteered. I was there because I volunteered. I'm here because I didn't get hit. And because it sure wasn't any place to hide. You know, they had the hospital again about the size of this where they were doing meatball surgery. And that was in the one destroyed bunker that was more or less safe. It was safe from anything but a direct hit from the artillery or mortar shell. And they had mortars that were like flying garbage cans. In the first handful, they went all the way out over the beach and did no damage, and they got to be sort of like a joke. Then they got the range, and they didn't have too many of them, but when they did hit, they would destroy anything around. And the beach was completely littered with landing craft. And they couldn't get them off because they were sunk on the beach. So nobody really knew what was going on. I mean, we didn't have radios that functioned. The radio back then weighed about 60 pounds or whatever. It was a great big rubber pack on the guy's back with an antenna that went up about 6 foot. So he was a target. And the guys with a flamethrower, they were targets. And then anybody who looked important, you know, was target. So for a couple of weird days, well, permanent guard duty. I have no memory of ever being relieved or anything else. But in the next hole over, for a couple of days, there was a Protestant chaplain, and the reason he got to be a chaplain, he was a male nurse. So they drafted him into the Navy and made him a chaplain. Earl Dean Sneery, and Earl Dean Sneery had a guitar. He had a guitar, okay? And remember, the officers had their insignia, so all you would see out here would be the little gold part of the pin. You couldn't tell what the rate was. And Chaplain Sneery would go down to the beach, and they were bringing in the little tiny, like the stuff that you get on the airplanes, the little bottles of brandy. And he would go down and requisition a whole bunch of little bottles of brandy. And then he'd go and visit the wounded in the hospital, and he'd check with the corpsman. Who could have a little something? He had one guy who he had the most terrifying scream you ever heard. He had nightmares, and I had never heard it. And he would scream, and it would be absolute terror, and then a struggle, and then it would go off into a gurgle that sounded like his throat had been cut. And nobody wanted to share a tent with him. Nobody wanted to be around him, because it didn't happen too often, but when it did, it was just blood-curdling, terrible. As it was, I sneaked into the Corps really. Is the camera on?
Yes.
And I won't tell you how I sneaked into the Corps. Yeah, it's pretty simple. I had varicose veins in the testicle, which, according to my doctor, would make it impossible for me to do hikes or whatever. And when I went for the physical, the room was so cold that everything clamped up, and he was completely wrong. I could outrun and outdo. Almost, I got passed once running, and it still bothers me. One time. It was downhill after a 30-mile hike, but I should not have been passed. But yeah, a perfect match of a mouthy Irishman and from Brooklyn and the Marine Corps. And the guy said, well, the Marines made you. Well, we made the Corps. You take, what kind of person is going to, you say, well, we want you to jump from a plane, and everybody volunteers, and then you say, well, where do you get, oh, you shoot? So that's even better. So, yeah. So, but again, I have a great number of dysfunctional brothers, and some of these guys will go into the grave with me fairly soon. My life expectancy is 5 more years. 93 is it according to the actuary tables. So, and I have my grave all set. I checked with my rabbi. It's okay for me to have a little bit of sand in the coffin with me. And my wife is set to do my eulogy. It won't take too long. I'll do it for her because his brother was even worse. Mary is Catholic, and her grandchildren are taught to believe in the afterlife. So when I say I'm going to die, not too soon, but I'm going to die. And as far as I am concerned, that's the end. And well, you shouldn't say that. I said, well, I didn't say it was true. I said, that's the way I feel. Okay, so. I also, in the back of my mind, believe I can still run uphill. It's not a view that is shared with my body. We had a fairly interesting group in the combat intelligence. One of the guys was the heir to a few bucks. He was Van Sicklen was the name, Wallace Duryea Van Sicklen, and he was offered a very, very plush assignment because he was varsity swimmer for Princeton, butterfly, and they wanted to let him be on an Olympic-oriented Marine Corps swim group, and his reaction was, "I will not do that." So he was one. Then we had this other nutcase, John Boyd. He was a biker, 18 years old, two-beer Boyd we called him because that's all he could drink. And anyhow, and then I was the third party in this interesting group, and we were doing explosives. And we had a pretty strange group to start with, and we had our next door neighbors in had that point in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, were they were from the Netherlands East Indies, and they were sappers. They were explosive experts, and they took over some of our training. So they were they thought they were pretty good. They were pretty autocratic, but that was okay. They were good at what they did. So we went out and we're using 2-pound blocks of TNT and experimenting with you have a fuse lighter. You crimp the blasting cap, and the instructor was very, he said, you get the idea across. He says, first you hold it like this, and then you put it around behind you to crimp it, because if it goes off, the most things you will have is a lot of pieces of copper in your ass. If you do it in front of your face, you go blind. So we all remembered that. Okay. And then you go through what you can do with a 2-pound block of 2A TNT. It's pretty impressive. One thing you can do is you just use the block and use it as a demolition grenade. Well, being reasonable people, we figured out that if you take the fuse lighter and put it on the fuse, the shortest fuse you can have will give you about 4.5 seconds. So, John and I figured out that if we took the fuse lighter and cut some of it off, that we could use a shorter fuse. When it was only this long, it would give you about maybe 2.5 seconds. So, we set up Wallace Duryea Van Sicklen. I don't know if it was the first or second or third, but it was great, Wally. So we set him up with a block of TNT. We'll help you. So we've got this, now we got the fuse only this long. Put the fuse lighter on it. Okay, are you ready to throw? Okay. John is ready with the fuse lighter, and I'm standing there with a Brownie camera. About this close. Okay, the three of us right together with a 2-pound block of TNT. So, okay, Ronnie, are you ready? Yeah, sure. That much fuse sticking out, not much time. Okay, so that was pretty good for a starter. Then they say, well, okay, we're at the garbage dump. I want somebody to go out there and take in that old ice box out there. Go out there and blow that up. We'll do that. We'll do it. Sure. The three of us, okay? So he's explaining to probably Ronnie, because he was more responsible type. But anyhow, while he's explaining everything, the other two of us go over to the box of explosives, and we're picking up 2-pound blocks of TNT and putting them in the pockets of the fatigue jacket. So I know I had 4. I'm pretty sure John had the same. And then Ronnie had Ronnie had the 1. Okay? So we used a very long fuse because we knew, nobody else knew. So we go out there and we're going to blow this thing. And instead of 1 pound, we now have 9 pounds, pretty much. Maybe only 7 or 8, but a really good pile of TNT, let me tell you. So, and we're all set. We light the fuse, and we come running back, and everybody's saying, "Why are you running like that?" Okay, well, the one thing that you are taught from day one is when you say hit the deck, everybody goes down. There's no, you don't go that long. It's just, you're down, right? So we come racing back. We're tearing back, hit the deck. We go down, and that was a very impressive explosion. Let me tell you, that was something else. And our instructor looked, and I don't know what he thought, but he realized that he had let this collection of idiots get at his box of explosives, and we never heard another word about it. But that was about the level of, like pulling the pin on a grenade and tossing it to your friend and saying, "Think fast." The sort of thing that my first wife did not believe until we met a guy in a RV who was American Indian, who was a scout, and he said, "Of course we used to do that too." And she looked like, which is about it's pretty, being 18 years old, your industry, you know you can't be hurt. Okay? So I did go off the 10-foot wall head first once. You know, I said, did you live through it? And the answer is, did I live through it? You should see me now. Yeah, I went off at head first, did a beautiful snap roll and came up, didn't even get a sore neck. Oh, one more small thing, just about being normal. The week before Marine Corps boot camp, screwing around on the roof of the boathouse in Prospect Park, and went off and landed with my legs up in the air and landed on the coccyx like that and busted my coccyx. So I went through boot camp and combat intelligence and everything else in flat out screaming pain, and I never would tell anybody because they would have tried to win the war without me. So all the time I'm doing this, I am floating on very a lot of pain. So and then I worked one-handed for 20 years on heavy and highway because I got the left arm torn out wrestling. So I used just one hand to work most of the time. Perfectly normal. Okay? And these are the people who you entrusted to save your country. Or at least I wasn't so strange that I was sifted out. Perhaps I should have been. That trying to hide behind the combat wire, watching the pieces, they heavy duty, they had like a 19mm heavy machine gun, and watching that stuff march towards me and then stop and realize that there wasn't a thing in this world I could do about it or have done about it or anything else. It just, they stopped firing. Small things like that. And you get, little pump. I guess the biggest one would really be the flag. Seeing it up there for real. And then just everybody, just, my God. Just, wow. Just how good can you feel? And then taking now.
Let's regroup.
You are ask an Irishman to talk. You got to expect to get a few words.